Alrighty, welcome back, boys and girls. It's your main math man, Miss Shank, coming to you live from Alameda International High School. And in this video, we're going to be talking about some trigonometry and kind of get some review going for us. So we identify the hypotenuse, or the side C, by finding the side that is opposite of the right angle. Again, you can always draw that arrow from the right angle to that opposite side. And then we're going to say that hypotenuse of the triangle is going to be the longest of the three sides in a triangle. So always make sure you can draw that angle, or from that right angle to the side opposite, to show which side is your hypotenuse. And then some new concepts, we can say trigonometry is going to be the branch of mathematics that studies the relationship between the side lengths and angles of a triangle. And those three trigonometric ratios, we're going to say it's going to be sine, which is S-I-N, and it have a little button there for you so that way you can get used to seeing it. So we have sine, cosine, and tangent. So again, make sure you're kind of seeing those abbreviations for it, but make sure you're understanding what those stand for. Alright, so now when we're talking about that, again, make sure you can have those trigonometric ratios and have those identities ready to go. And so take a second, have those different colors ready so that way you can kind of see how these work. So first we're going to label our sides. And so how do we do that? Again, make sure you can kind of see where that right angle is, and make sure you can see where that angle theta is. So we're going to say, okay, we draw the arrow opposite of the right angle is going to be the hypotenuse. And so we say that is going to be our longest side. Then we could say, okay, the side that is next to the angle theta is going to be adjacent. So again, that's going to be the side right next to, or our neighbor side is going to be adjacent. And then the side that is opposite of the angle theta is called opposite. So you can actually just have that word opposite, and those are going to be your three sides. So you have hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite. And so now we're going to figure out what ratio we need to have to figure out our problem. So make sure if you're solving for one of them, you got to make the right decision. So for example, we have the sine of theta is going to be the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. So it's going to be that side length of the opposite, and it's going to be the side length of the hypotenuse is equal to the sine of theta. The other trig ratio identity that we need is going to be the cosine of theta is going to be adjacent divided by hypotenuse. And then the third one is going to be the tangent of theta is equal to the opposite divided by the adjacent. So again, make sure you can have each of those for yourself. And so once you select your trig ratio that you use, we're going to say, okay, step 3 we substitute, and the last step we solve. And you'll kind of see what those look like in just a second. But an easy way to remember these, because there's a lot of these going on, again, always feel free to pause, ask questions at any point in time. But an easy way to remember these is like this. So I can have, this is SOHCAHTOA. So this is basically one of the easiest things to remember in math class. You just have these letters in this pattern help you remember what those identities are. So you're gonna say, use that space for yourself to have those capital letters. We're gonna say the sine of theta is gonna be the opposite over the hypotenuse. You're gonna say cosine is gonna be adjacent over the hypotenuse, and then you can have the tangent of theta is gonna be the opposite over the adjacent. All right, so let's be able to determine first which trig ratio should be used. So make sure you label your sides first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an arrow from the right angle to the side that is opposite of the right angle, which is the hypotenuse. And so make sure you can label it the hypotenuse. I just say HYP, so that way we can keep it short. And then I can label our angle theta. That's going to be our angle theta, which means the side opposite of that angle is going to be labeled as opposite, which is x. And then we can say the side that is next to it, theta, is going to be the adjacent side, which is 12. So again, make sure you can take your time, be able to label each of those. And so now, using this information, what am I gonna, which trig ratio am I going to choose? Well, we are solving for the opposite because we're saying we're solving for x when we are given the adjacent. So that means they're going to have the tan, meaning the tangent of theta, is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. So again, make sure you are choosing the right one so that way you can solve it carefully. And the next one, be able to draw your side opposite of the right angle first, and we're going to say that's the hypotenuse. So we're given the hypotenuse, we have our angle theta as 21 degrees, and we have the side opposite of theta is going to be x, which is the side opposite. And so that means that unmarked side, which we don't necessarily need, but we can always label it as adjacent. So we have our three sides and our angle, and we're solving for the side opposite when we are given the hypotenuse. And so we need to have that sine of theta is going to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. And so when you are choosing these, again, make sure you're saying, okay, I'm given one of these two in this ratio, and I need to solve for the last one. Alright, in the next one, you can have your side opposite the right angle. Get used to drawing that first. You have your angle theta, which is 57 degrees, and the side opposite of theta is going to be 10.8. And we can have adjacent is right next to it, which is unmarked, but that's okay because we don't necessarily need it for this problem. So we're going to be solving for the hypotenuse when we're given the opposite. So that means we're going to use the sine of theta to solve and set up our ratio. So we have opposite over the hypotenuse. And lastly, for this one, a little bit trickier, but we can still set it up carefully. Draw that side opposite of the right angle first is going to be our hypotenuse, which is x. We're going to say, okay, our angle theta is 72 degrees, and that side opposite of theta is going to be that long vertical side, which means that 6 is going to be our adjacent side. And so we're going to be solving for the hypotenuse when we are given the adjacent side. So that means that we're going to use cosine for this one. So we have cosine of theta is going to be equal to the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So now go ahead, pause the video here, take some time to go through your assignment and determine which trig ratio you're going to use on each of those problems. Compare with your partner or your neighbor, see what they have. That way you can, have that assignment started well. All right, picking up where we left off. Make sure your calculator is in degrees. A way to do that is like this. I go ahead, I click on mode, and I can have this wonderful screen that has all these options on it. But what I want to do is I want to go down and scroll down to where it has degree. And so notice your options are degree or radian. I want to make sure I am in degrees, make sure it's entered and it will be selected. Also too, you'll notice at the top it has the mode that you are in, so make sure you can see it there. And then to get out of this, you just hit second mode again to quit out. So make sure that you're using that carefully. Again, you will get different answers, and some of those answers will be wrong if you don't have them in degrees. Alright, so in that first example, we have this triangle ABC, and we're trying to solve for x, that missing side. So step one, we want to label. So I'm going to label my sides. So I have the side opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse, which don't necessarily need for this one, but it helps us set it up. We have our angle theta, which is 32 degrees, and we have the side opposite of that angle theta is going to be x, which means that 13 is going to be the adjacent side. Alright, so now that we have our labels, we can move to step two, pick that ratio that we're trying to use for this problem. So we are solving for the opposite, which is x, when we are given the adjacent, which is 13. So that means that we're going to use tangent of theta is going to be equal to the opposite over the adjacent. So then we have step three, which is substitute. So I'm going to plug in my variables, or my values for my variables. So again, I can take these values out and put them into my ratio. So I'm going to have tangent of 32, since that is theta. I'm going to have this equal to the ratio, where in my numerator I have x, and in my denominator I have 13. So once I have this wonderful equation set up, this is where people are going to make a mistake. So make sure you're able to solve this equation. So that's going to be that fourth step, solve for x. So we're trying to get x by itself. So what I want to do is I want to multiply both sides by 13. So I have on the left side and on the right side I multiply by 13, because that gets rid of the 13 in the denominator. And so we're going to have 13 times tan of 32 is going to be equal to x, and so we can use that calculator to be able to solve for that. So I'm going to have in my calculator be able to type, I have 13, I have tangent of 32, I have my value that is in there, I hit enter, and so let's find out. Well, I have two options here, so which of these is the right answer? So a way to check it is like this. Make sure that you see on the left side I have a radian, which is not what we want. However, on the right side we have degrees, so make sure that you're saying, okay, our answer for this one would be 8.12. In the, example number 2, we have solve each triangle for the missing side. So we're gonna first label that wonderful triangle, and so we can have our side opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse. So we're gonna say we're gonna be solving for x, which is the hypotenuse. We're gonna say our angle theta is gonna be 57 degrees, and that means that 10.8 is gonna be our side opposite of the angle theta. So that means, okay, pick our ratio. We're going to be solving for the hypotenuse when given the side opposite. So that means we can use the sine of theta, which is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. Substitute in our values for our variables, and so I have the sine of 57 is equal to 10.8 over x. So this is a little bit trickier, but we can still walk through it step by step. So I'm trying to get the x by itself, but I need to make sure it's in the numerator so that way it's easier to solve. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to multiply both sides by x, because I'm trying to get x equals a value. However, since in the denominator it's a little bit trickier, that's okay though, because we can set it up like this. So we're going to use our algebra skills, multiply both sides by x, and so now I have x times the sine of 57 is equal to 10.8, and then what I'm going to do for my last step is I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 57. That will give me x equals 10.8 over the sine of 57, which is going to be what our value is. So what I can do in my wonderful calculator, I can have 10.8 divided by, and then I have the sine of 57. I hit enter, get my value, and get my answer. Again, I notice that it is in degrees, so I am good. Again, make sure if you're stuck at any point in time, feel free to take a deep breath, relax, it's okay. I'll be there to assist you. Be sure to ask questions, calculate carefully, and as always, super slam that subscribe button.